everyone, I'm Sofia Penny. I'm the manager here at the Woodlands Art Gallery Studios. I just recently graduated from Texas State with a BA in Art History and Studio, and today I am joined with our upcoming featured artist, Grayson Chandler.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course. So before we get into your work, could you tell me a little bit about your artistic journey and your formal art training?
Let's start with college, I suppose. That's a good
starting
segment.
point.
So I went to college at University of North Texas in Denton, Texas. Majored in painting and drawing, and let's say as the process unfolded, it kind of was revealed that this is what I wanted to do, and so there was a sort of tonal shift, I suppose, from being a student to being an artist that took place in college. And since graduating in 2018, I've had 3 solos.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I mean it's going pretty well.
Did your professors play a large influence in your work and help guide you?
No. Actually, I was rather surprised that you don't actually learn how to paint no one teaches you how to paint. They can kind of guide you to inform yourself as to what it is you want to paint, and from there they're kind of just mentoring you more on your helping you find the questions that you're looking for instead of any answers that they'll provide.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Would you say there are any certain artists or time periods that influence your work?
I mean, you kind of have to learn all of it in order to understand the context of any of it. But I mean, since abstract expressionism, I'd say anything before that point is kind of approaches irrelevance in my work. But postmodernism towards just contemporary art now. Abstract, of course. As for artists, I really am partial to Darren Waterston, Dorothy Hood, Virgil Grotfeld, Jackie Tileston.
Yeah, and I noticed that when I'm reading your artist statement, you use words like uncanny, and to me, I automatically think of surrealism.
Yeah, there's certainly a heavy dose of surrealist ethic.
Because you give the viewer a cue of what they're looking at, but then as we look further, we realize we actually don't know this space at all.
Right, and that there is the uncanny connotation, because it does sort of approach a little bit of absurdness, at least in far of it as it's so abstract that to take any route, the audience has to take a position, and where is your most accessible position to take with an abstract artwork is probably your own experience. So to return to the uncanny part, it's you're kind of using your own devices, your own circumference of experience to talk to the work. And so I find that, because I mean the process as it occurs is the same for me as it is for the audience, at least I hope so. And so there's a sense of discovery that unfolds, and with that, it's sort of like you're rediscovering your own sensibilities, and that kind of feels familiar, but it's intersecting with something that is too nebulous to really draw from
a conclusion of.
Correct.
And why do you choose mediums like watercolor and oil to translate your ideas? What about them is most effective?
That's a good question, because it's really the beginning of the process, and wet media, it allows for a wide margin of incidence to occur. So that's a sort of range. It opens up a range of possibility in which I can take cues from and feedback, and then in turn respond to. And so, because it is naturally occurring, it gives the impression of something that naturally occurs, and
Yeah.
the way I respond to it is, you know, part and parcel of how I'd like the viewer, or how I'd encourage the viewer to follow.
And your use of color choice, it can go from dark blacks to transparent colors that almost seem to glow. How do you decide how you go into the color? Is it pre-planned?
No. So I don't go into a piece with any expectation or any notion of what it might be. Color is a good starting point, but more so it's about, at the very beginning at least, finding sort of patterns that emerge, maybe motifs, you know. So in my practice as a whole, over the years, a visual vocabulary has emerged, and that kind of, it helps me to be more literate in my own practice.
Yeah.
To help me orient myself through the piece. And there's a certain, like I said, it's I'm trying to discover something, and so I can't really know where I'm going to lead, but the colors and the amount of water and the properties of the materials that I'm using, those provide the material, or those provide the variables for whatever piece I'm working with. And so you can kind of think about it as like every piece is a experiment looking for a hypothesis.
Wow, that's a great way to put it. Yeah, so you sound much more like an intuitive artist than a pre-planned, lots of research and laying it all out beforehand.
Sure. I mean, but yes, intuition is probably like the keystone in the arc of the practice. And I think that's because trying to plan it, I found that it's going to end up different than I supposed
so why
anyways.
even try?
So, right, you know, I found that the most enlightening things often occur because I wasn't expecting them to, and now I'm faced with a junction that I have to make a decision, and it's those decisions that kind of tail off into something that
And then create something
takes me
else.
somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, wow. And I noticed that most of your work is on a smaller scale. Is there a certain reason for it? When do you decide to go big and small?
Well, that's the question I receive most often, most recently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's there's not really like anything high concept to that. It's just
What happens. It's just what happens.
well, it's just that I am in a studio where, you know, if I were to make larger pieces, well, I need to have somewhere to store them. Where
Yeah.
with watercolor, that's an advantage because they're flat, so obviously I can stack them. But with watercolors, I also need to frame them for shows. So
Yes. Yeah.
well, that can be expensive. And so if I have smaller works, then that's just a part, you know, of the beginning of the practice, just trying to not bite off more than I can chew.
Right. So how do you go about titling your artworks?
That all comes after the work is done. So I might even title a piece until I have to put it in a show. But the way that I go about that is much like how the process starts, is I don't know what it's going to be, but now that it's done, now that it's here, and I can look at it and I can have a dialogue with it that's more thorough than it was in the beginning of the piece.
Yeah.
So there's a more succinct notion that I feel that the piece is discussing. And I might just go to thesource.com and just type in a word that I feel like resonates with the piece I'm looking at, and just see where that will take me.
Yeah. How would you guide the viewer through one of your pieces?
So to begin, let's revisit that uncanny, where what draws you in is there's a sort of familiarity, but despite that familiarity, there's an uncanny sense that maybe you've been here before. You're
Yeah.
familiar with this, but it's a little strange.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that juxtaposition between what you know and what you don't know, and what I'm trying to kind of embolden is what you maybe didn't know that you did know.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for one instance, flower petals often
Mm-hmm.
emerge in the compositions. And what that does is it gives a point of access to the viewer, I think, that might not otherwise be there if it's entirely non-objective.
Yes.
So, everybody's familiar with flower petals.
It's comforting to see it and be like, okay, I can walk into this now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you already know what a flower petal is, and within the greater context of the painting, they reflect a certain atmospheric lightness,
Mm-hmm.
And that's echoed in the composition itself. And so, because there's already that sort of latent lightness,
Yes.
it's less ambiguous. It's less ambiguous, and so. You can sort of anchor yourself there as a starting point, and then as you explore the composition and it unfolds, you can then begin to parse the more abstract stuff.
Yeah, and what's so great about abstraction is that from every person's life experiences, they're all different, so we're all going to see it different.
Right. So yeah, there's no wrong way to look
Right.
at it. However you go about it is really just you're trying to, whatever you're looking for, you're going to find it if you're invested enough.
Mm-hmm. So what are you working on now, and what can your followers expect to see next?
So commercially speaking, just trying to get into new galleries, get into new markets.
Yeah, expand.
2023 seems to be the year of Waco.
Awesome.
Yeah, I have one show in spring and one in fall. And then for 2024, I'm looking to bridge out into the coasts.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for meeting with us today. Grayson's work will be on display here at the Woodlands Art Gallery and Studios through October 20th and January 14th, 2023.